Thank you guys for tuning in to the first ever episode of Affluent Adolescents. I'm your host, Anthony Ortiz.
Your co-host, Jason Morello here.
And we're extremely excited to have our first ever guest on the podcast. He is the founder and managing partner of Momentum Multifamily, a multifamily acquisitions firm that excels in buying, managing, and selling multifamily assets in growing markets to provide outstanding returns to his investors.
So, like, technically, you just buy and sell real estate, multifamily real estate.
That's it.
Yeah, just simple terms.
Hayden Harrington, guys.
Let's go.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on the podcast.
Let's do it.
Dude, yeah, man, we're super excited to have you on. Super excited to pick your brain and gain some knowledge from you, man.
Yeah,
So-
no, appreciate you again having me on. I think it's cool seeing the younger generation getting started, you know, educating themselves, and also looking forward to educate the next generation beyond that as well.
Heck yeah, man.
That's all it's all about.
So, yeah, dude, multifamily real estate, I feel like that's a huge, like, everyone sees these buildings. And when I was younger, I used to be like, how are people, like, people obviously own these, but how are people buying these? Was that, like, always a dream of yours when you were younger, seeing these big buildings and, you know, owning them? Or
Yeah, you know, I got started in real estate in my teenage years with my dad. You know, he was never really an entrepreneur, but, you know, every other year, he'd kind of get a new rental project, and he was his, you know, day job was he was an engineer, and so he liked to know how everything worked, and he liked to figure things out himself too. So, you know, he was never the type of guy that just contracted all the work out. It was just, you know, he was doing the work, and then, you know, as a byproduct of that, kind of dragged me into all the projects, and that's what first got me exposed to real estate to begin with, which, you know, looking back, you know, I'm really fortunate. Not a lot of teenagers get that early experience in real estate. And so it was pretty cool. You know, it was a lot of work just because it was just us doing it, you know, busting up floors and knocking down walls and all that. So a lot of fun, great, you know, education, learning process. But, yeah, that's kind of where it started to spark that, you know, dream to go bigger, because more so out of just frustration with the, you know, the problems that come along with not having scale. So, like, you know, if you have one rental, you're 100% occupied or you're zero. And, you know, that's great when you have a good tenant. And we had some good tenants, but we also had some not so good tenants. Yeah. So that's really, honestly, what kind of inspired the dream to look to go bigger, was just to kind of minimize risk. And, you know, I'm a team-oriented type of person, so I didn't want to do all the work myself. You know, did it for many years with my dad, essentially. And I was like, okay, I'm tired of this. Like, this is going to take forever to get where I want to go, you know?
Yeah. Man, so doing all the nitty-gritty work, just, heck no.
It's just, they gave you a good head start, though, huh? To working with your dad like that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it gave me a good understanding of what a building needs. Right. You know, a lot of people get into multifamily because they think it's just a numbers game, and it is largely a numbers game. But, you know, you got to know the reality of, like, what you're getting into. Yeah. You know, you need to come into, you know, deals well capitalized so that you can address the problems, so that you're going to be able to continuously keep and attract new tenants. And so, kind of blending that knowledge with, you know, the number side is really important, in my opinion. Right. So I looked at it as, you know, kind of a little bit of a leg up, because I got that, you know, real world hands-on experience, which not a ton of people, even if you're flipping, a lot of times they'll contract all that stuff out, and they're not really doing it themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great way to gain experience, especially with doing it someone like your dad. You know, I'm sure you guys have, or he was very open at helping you out and doing everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've done a lot together. You know, we've built staircases. Like I said, we've ripped out walls, reframed, you know, added. We've done conversions where you had like a 2 and 2, you can convert it to a 3 and 2. And, you know, it just kind of shows, you know, how to add value too. Like a 3 and 2 is more valuable than a 2 and 2, you know? So, yeah, you know, invaluable experience, but, you know, ultimately not where I wanted to stay.
Yeah. So like growing up in that and kind of seeing the real estate space on that aspect, like single family, you know, buying, flipping, having your tenants, is that what you wanted to pursue, like going into college? Is that what you studied after high school, or how was that?
Not really, to be honest. I kind of fell into it. I always had a, you know, love for it because I was exposed to it for so long and so early. You know, I played sports, so a long time the goal was, hey, I want to go pro and all that.
Right.
And, you know, after a lot of injuries and doing that for a long time, kind of gave that up. But so that was, you know, largely the main focus through my childhood and teenage years and all that. But went to college and really didn't really know what I wanted. I knew I wanted business because I think I was naturally kind of inclined to go that way.
Yeah.
But really didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And so it wasn't until I got out of college and I actually started a nutrition company. And, you know, that's kind of where, you know, the entrepreneur in me, I think, came out.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, that's where my, you know, passion for marketing and branding and all these things, thinking about customer experience, I think I started to develop. And yeah, I think that, you know, that was a great little venture as well. And, you know, when I exited that, that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to what I really enjoy is, you know, the real estate. And I'm just going to put my head down and figure this thing out.
Yeah.
So going into college, what did you major in? What was your, you know, what was your big thing?
Yeah, I went to school for business marketing.
Okay.
Left after 2 years, so never finished. But
It's all right.
A room full of college dropouts.
Yeah.
Let's go.
yeah, I mean, literally, it's kind of ironic too, because the one class that I credit that kind of pushed me over the edge was an economics class, and it was once a week. And it was a 3-hour basically a PowerPoint presentation. And I was like, man, I'm sleeping through this class.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm not learning anything here. And I'm forgetting it as soon as I walk out the door. And this just frankly isn't how I learn. You know, I'm not a PowerPoint type presentation, you know, learner. And I, you know, in school I never really did. I did okay. But I was always kind of middle of the pack sort of thing. And there was a few classes that really stood out to me that I really poured myself into, and I showed myself kind of what I was capable of, that when I find something that I'm interested in, I can do really well at.
Right.
You know, one of those classes was actually a psychology class in college. Just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And
Really?
kind of led me down the personal development path. And, you know, I think the average grade in the class was like a C. Really tough teacher and everything. But I loved it. So I poured myself into it and ended up getting an A in the class. And I think that kind of gave me a glimpse of, you know, when you find that thing that you're passionate about, and if you actually put forth all the effort, pour yourself into it, like you can surprise yourself what you're capable of.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And then, you know, combine that with also understanding how I learn with that other class showing me, hey, this is not me.
Right.
That's what I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to put all my effort into what I want.
Right.
And I'm just going to go out there and try and figure it out.
You think those experiences in college would have made you different than who you are right now? Like if you didn't end up dropping out or whatever, you think you'd be in the same place you'd be now?
No, I definitely don't.
No,
you know?
You think college played a big role into who you are right now?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's 1,000 different things that have happened since then, and so much of it, I think, you know, when you pour yourself into something and when you take a chance on yourself, you know, you start to realize that the stars will kind of align for you.
Right.
And looking back, you're like, man, how did that work out? How did that happen? You know, for instance, like when I started the nutrition company, you know, full intention was I'm going to run this thing out of my mom's garage. Like we set her garage up, like we built shelves, and
That's awesome.
we had a shipping station, an inventory station.
Really?
I was like,
how old were you at the time when you were doing this?
I was 19.
Nice. Okay, cool.
And so did one final run up to Dallas. I was like, hey, I want to meet these guys, this manufacturer. I want to just see the facility, how this all works. And came up here and, you know, ended up hitting it off with the guys that own the place. And they liked the idea. They liked the passion and the brand. And they were like, hey, can you stick around? Can you present a business plan? I was like, okay. You know,
Damn, at 19, dude.
That's a big deal.
Awesome.
That's awesome, dude. That's dope.
And ended up about a week later, you know, ended up partnering with those guys. And, you know, the next, I think in 2 weeks, just like, hey, I'm hightailing it up to Dallas, got the cheapest apartment, probably the roughest area of Dallas. But, you know, we had office space, we had warehouse space, we had connections, we had, you know, they ran our entire first line on consignment, which basically means that they did it for us, you know, at their expense, and then we could pay them back as we sold stuff.
Right.
And, you know, the original business plan, I think we had scraped together a few $1,000s. And we're like, okay, we're going to have, this will cover our first production line. We're going to have a little bit in savings to cover us as we burn through product and so forth. And, it ended up costing like 6 or 7 times what we initially thought. Like, it ended up costing way more. And if that hadn't worked out, like, we would have been toast in the first few months of operations, we just wouldn't have been able to sustain.
Right.
And, they were growing at such a pace, not even probably 6 months after we struck a deal, their minimums were so high that we couldn't have probably even talked to them. So that's one of those things where you look back and it's like, man, if I wouldn't have taken that action, that opportunity probably never would have happened. So I absolutely believe, like, everything, especially when you're driven by your purpose and going after what you want, being true to yourself, I think, opportunity just starts to open up and present itself.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, even meeting your brother, like, totally by chance, we started a networking event, a meetup up here in Dallas, just to educate investors. And that was a way for me to provide value to my now business partner, Dustin. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, I just got to get people in the room. Yeah. Like, because if nobody shows up, that's, it's going to be a hard sell to Dustin, like, let's keep doing this, right? If nobody's in the room. Right. And I was just sending messages to anybody I could on Meetup. And Ruben, Anthony's brother, actually reached out. And he was one of the few that actually, responded to my messages.
That's awesome.
And then, he came to, I think, our second event, and he was a sponsor by the third. And, now we office together, and he's doing all the rehab work on our properties.
That's sick, dude.
Crazy.
And a little story on how me and Hayden met. So at the time, I think it was my sophomore year of high school. I was like 15.
Right.
And, I look up to my brother a lot, little brother, want to be like his big brother. Right. And he would tell me about, certain things like, oh, hey, I met this person, I'm doing this. Because he also is big on, like, educating me from a young age. He wanted me to, learn. And he told me, he's like, hey, I'm meeting with this, with this guy. He buys apartment complexes, him and his partner. He does, these events. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And he was like, yeah, we meet every Monday at this coffee shop. And I was like, oh, sweet. And then one of the days I was just like, hey, can you ask him if I can go? And at the time, I didn't really think anything of it. I was just like, oh, this guy buys apartment complex. Like, that's cool. I want to meet him.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah. And sure enough, he's like, yeah, come next Monday. We'll meet at, I think it was like 8 a.m. It was during the summer. I remember I was helping him out with, like, certain little jobs here and there. And I show up, and they're kind of having their meeting, and I'm just kind of a fly on the wall listening. And like 30 minutes into the meeting, my brother was like, all right, I got a jet. Anthony, you can stay here and talk to Hayden. And I was like, oh, I didn't think I was going to get to this
15-year-old kid
like,
just talking to
I
this
thought
guy.
I was just going to sit here and listen, and then we would all leave together. But thinking back on it now, the thing that struck me the most about Hayden is he sat there and took me 100% seriously, answered all my questions. Like, there was no, like, what am I doing sitting here talking to this 15-year-old kid? Like, he took me seriously. And to this day, I appreciate that so much because it kind of, at that time, it was like so big for me. So I was like, man, I can sit in the room with these people and have conversations with them. Like, I can do this.
That's so cool.
And, from there, I mean, we've known each other for a while now, but
that's dope.
It was sweet.
Yeah, that's a cool story because, what I saw in you, I think I saw a part of me in too. And it was kind of my hope in that next generation too. Because you see a lot of people, especially in their teens and 20s, that are so lost.
Yeah.
And, there was something in you that you had some sense of direction. I was like, okay, you got to nurture that.
Right.
Because that's very important and that's rare.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I think is amazing about what you guys are doing too, is to educate more of those, younger generation, to give them clarity and purpose behind what they're going to spend their time in their 20s doing.
Right.
Because I think your 20s are your most important years.
Yeah,
that's
100%.
That's where you build the foundation of the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Really. Because, to take a chance, to take a risk on yourself, on your dreams, gets harder when you have kids, when you buy a house.
Huge responsibilities,
cars. Yeah. And, you feel, you got a lot of weight on your shoulders. You got a lot of responsibility, and that gets harder and harder to take a risk, when you have all that riding.
Right. Right. Yeah. Take it comfortably at least, Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And back to kind of what you were saying,
that's right.
Nutrition company. From there, when that kind of, fell through and you weren't doing that anymore, what was your, life looking like at that point? What did you start doing for like work or income or anything?
That's when I was like, okay, you know what? I didn't want to go get another job because I knew I'd potentially miss out on, meetings or phone calls that can make all the difference. Because again, it's like a spontaneous trip to Dallas led to a partnership.
Right.
I don't want to miss out on a lunch that could do the same,
Right.
So it was like, I'm going to go all in. I had a little bit of savings. I had to make some sacrifices. I sold my car and, I was driving around my grandfather's old Jeep. And,
oh, wow.
Nice.
I was like, I'm going all in. Like, if I'm going to take a chance, if I'm going to take a risk, I'm going to bet on me.
There's no turning back. Like, it's going to work out.
I don't want to regret something, 10 years from now. So I was like, you know what? If I can't make this work, great. But I tried, I wanted to at least say to myself, I tried. I gave it all I could.
Right.
And so that's when I really just started trying to understand how. Well, first of all, I was like, okay, I know I want to be in commercial because I'm done with residential, so I want to go bigger. And just to confirm where, there's a lot of different aspects of commercial, right? We're sitting in an office building right now. There's obviously apartments and triple net stuff. There's development. There's all kinds of different avenues you could go down. And so I was like, okay, first of all, I want to understand what the landscape looks like. I want to go talk to people in each of these. And so, growing up, I knew my dad had a friend. He owned some office buildings. So it's like, okay, you know what, I'm going to go take him out to lunch. So I went and talked to him, understand kind of the pros and cons about what he did. And then, talked to, there's a group that it was actually on the way to my gym. They bought like Walgreens and CVS's, triple net stuff.
Oh, nice.
So
okay, cool.
go talk to those guys. And then a buddy of mine, he was like, hey, I work out at this gym and, there's a commercial real estate lender. You might want to talk to him. So like, yeah, absolutely. Send me his contact. So I took him out to lunch and he was like, hey, I've got a client that builds, ground up retail.
Right.
Okay,
So just
let's talk.
Interesting. Yeah.
Talking to anyone and everyone that you could.
Absolutely.
That was
anybody that was in the commercial space, I wanted to talk to.
Right.
And I wanted to go and take them out to lunch because I was like, hey, you guys have provided me with value. I want to, let me buy you lunch. Let me just take you out.
And so with these guys, you just talk to them. You just pick their brain, just like how we're doing with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just ask them questions. Most people in the commercial space are, happy to. It's a high barrier to entry, so they all know they had to have somebody help them.
Right.
So they're most likely going to, offer the same, or at least their time, to give some sort of guidance. And so a lot of those guys were pretty open, and it was just kind of navigating like where do I actually want to go, and ended up settling on multifamily just because I thought it was safest. Everybody will always need a roof over their head, right? Everybody needs a place to live. The pandemic showed that office, hospitality, retail, did not do so well. Yeah. And so I think it was a good decision, and it was closest to what I knew. Obviously there's a single family and multifamily are two different ball games, but at least, you're still providing the same sort of service, right? You're providing a roof over somebody's head. So that's what I ultimately settled on, tried to figure out how to get a seat at the table.
Yeah. And I know I listened to another podcast you were on. You mentioned how you were asking these people to work for them, trying to provide value to them. Mm-hmm. How was that experience? Were people like open to you coming on and helping them out, or?
Yeah, not really. And
you would think free work. Yeah, dude, come on.
Right. Yeah. That's the first thing that pops in your brain when how can I add value is, well, I'll just offer my time, right? And I've talked to a lot of other people that are in similar positions, just trying to start out, and that's the first thing that pops in their mind too. I was like, you need to get rid of that thought because it's not going to get you very far. Multiple times I offered that to people and got really close to landing like internships, or if that's what you want to call it, but ultimately didn't work out because they were like, well, I don't know what we do with you, basically. Yeah. And it took a lot of that happening multiple times for me to start to realize, what was I actually offering? Right. Was I offering value, or was I asking for value? Yeah. And when I put myself in their shoes, say, hey, let's just imagine for a second, I'm experienced. I've done a lot of deals. I've got a lot going on. Yeah. And this kid comes up to me and says, hey, can I work for you for free?
Yeah.
I would have to, if I'm the experienced person, I would know in my mind, I got to teach this guy.
Babysit the kid, yeah.
Exactly. And so the more I thought about that, I was like, maybe I'm not really offering value. Maybe I'm just asking for it.
Right.
And so that's when I had to change my approach. And I was like, okay, what is value? You know, what's going to actually get their attention? And, you know, the two things, there's a lot of things. Like your brother Ruben, he's a general contractor. He provides a lot of value too. That's, you know, one way you could offer value onto, you know, the ownership side of a property, discounted services or, you know, whatever. And so the first two things that popped into my mind, because I didn't have anything like that, was a deal or capital. And so, you know, knowing that I really didn't have that, you know, that much experience in the real estate world, especially on the multifamily side. And, you know, like I said, single family and multifamily are very different. So understanding what a good deal on the multifamily side is going to be challenging for somebody that had never bought one.
Yeah, especially dealing with so many units and such a large, you know,
a lot of things to take
expensive.
into account. Yeah,
exactly. So, you know, when you're just getting started out, there's stuff that you just don't know because you don't know, right? And so I was like, okay, a deal is going to be really challenging, especially because, you know, I knew the industry was controlled by brokers. It's pretty easy to find out. And so I was like, why would a broker send a great deal to somebody they've never heard of, right?
That's what I was going to ask. Like, they pick who they want these good deals to go to.
They want smooth transactions, right? These are big deals, big dollar amounts. They don't want to mess around, stuff falling out of contract.
Right.
You know, this is not like single family where you can, you know, you got a bunch of wholesalers and stuff like that. Offers getting accepted without understanding, you know, what you're actually capable of. Like your track record is everything in multifamily. Like, and there's also requirements you have to meet in terms of net worth, liquidity, and so forth. And you know, agencies like Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, they won't even lend you if you haven't done a loan with them, or somebody on your team hasn't done a loan with them before.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, that's gonna be tough.
So the deal was out of the option. Finding deals are kind of not really in your.
You know, I entertained that for, you know, when I was weighing the two options, and then I was like, okay, forget it, I'm done. And so that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on the capital. And, you know, I didn't know a lot of people that I could raise money from. But again, like I didn't want to keep that from realizing that goal. Right. And so I just said, okay, if I don't have them, like I'm going to go out and find them. And so, you know, I'd gone out to networking events and stuff like that, just trying to understand, you know, how this space works. Yeah. And I think that's an important step, you know, important piece of the puzzle too, because if you don't know how it all works, how do you figure out how you plug yourself into it, right? And so, you know, I started to notice some issues with networking, and I also started to realize that the people that were doing the deals were the ones putting on these networking events. Yeah. And that's how, when I had my light bulb moment, I was looking around at, you know, a restaurant where a local event was being held. I was like, these are all investors. Yeah. Like, what if I could create a better experience? And now I saw a pool of equity, not just a group of people. I was like, well, if I can get them all together and to know who I am and give them an experience, you know, maybe they'll start to correlate that to what it would be like if I were to invest with these guys. Right. So that's when I brought the idea up to Dustin, my now business partner. You know, I had taken him out to lunch. I was like, hey, he was one of those guys where I was like, hey, can I just pick your brain? Can I ask you some questions? Yeah. And I think it was the second time when I came to him and I was like, hey, I've got this idea. And I almost didn't bring it up, honestly. Right. I almost like talked myself out of it because for the longest time growing up as a kid, I was very introverted, very shy, and, you know, hated speaking in front of people in class when they're asking to call on people. You know, I'm the kid looking down, like, don't call on me.
Put your hoodie on,
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, that was always a major fear for me, was getting up and talking in front of people and stuff like that. And I knew when I was going to bring the idea up to him, I was like, well, if I'm co-hosting this thing, like, I'm going to have to talk a little.
Super confident,
And I almost didn't bring it up, but it was one of those things where, again, I was like, you know, I put everything on this goal. Right. Like, I don't care how it goes. I need to see this through, or else, you know, I'm not going to be able to believe in myself.
There's no point. Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? I don't care. I'm just going to bring it up, see if he even likes the idea, and kind of take it one step at a time from there. Brought it up, and he ended up, you know, saying, yeah, let's try it. And looking back, I'm like, holy cow, like he took a huge chance on me, because he's got his reputation at stake too. And I knew that, you know, that wasn't, he never said that to me, but it was kind of an unspoken thing. I was like, you know, I know that I'm taking on your reputation is at stake here. Yeah. And everything that we do collectively is a reflection of you too. And I cared way more about him than I did me, because I was like, nobody knows me in this space, right?
Because Dustin's a pretty well-known person in the multifamily space here in Dallas.
Is he?
Yeah, he's well respected. You know, he's done really well on all his deals in the past, and so I didn't really know the extent of that at the time, and so I didn't really know what I was getting into. But regardless, I was like, well, somebody's going to take a chance on me. I'm going to do my absolute best for them.
100%.
You know, they're providing me with a tremendous amount of value just as a byproduct of being a part of this thing.
Right.
I was like, you know what, you just show up, and I'll take care of everything else. And you know, if you like it, let's keep doing it. If you don't, no hard feelings. And took a chance, and you know, just one of the things that we did initially was, again, like I said, I'd been going around networking events, and I think that's the important part of understanding what you're getting into, because then you can understand how you can differentiate yourself too, which that's important. If you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, what's the incentive for somebody to go with you, right? Yeah. Whether you're selling a product, a service, or you're trying to start a networking event, you know? If you're doing the exact same thing, like, well, I'm just going to go back to what I know. Like, that's brand recognition 101. Right. And so I knew we had to do something different to stand out, to get people to actually come to something new. And so first thing I was like, okay, we're not doing it at a restaurant, because that's, it's not good for networking.
Yeah, I feel like that's the worst thing you could do. Like, let's go eat and talk.
Try to talk
while we eat.
It's a mess.
Exactly. You got waiters coming in and out. Yeah. It's noisy.
A lot of distractions.
You got other customers in the restaurant. Yeah. And then the biggest problem with networking specifically is you sit down at a table like this, and now I'm talking to you two for the next hour and a half. It's like, okay, I got 2 business cards, right? This is going to take forever to build my network, right? Like, I need to meet more people quicker.
Right.
And so I knew that was a major issue, because the problem with networking for a lot of people, and I was essentially solving a problem for myself, because like I said, I was very introverted. And so, naturally moving around a room, networking, meeting people wasn't my thing. And so for me, it was very difficult to say, hey, nice meeting you. I'm going to go talk to somebody else, right? Like, that's a hard, it's always difficult to get out of those conversations, right? And so I was like, okay, we're going to address that issue, because I think if I'm dealing with that, maybe other people out there are too.
Right.
So again, the first thing is, we're not doing it at a restaurant. Got it out of a restaurant. We did it at an office building at a title company, actually, that Dustin had worked with in the past.
Nice.
And the second thing was like, okay, how do we address that problem? How do we get people to actually network more efficiently? And so we called it a graceful exit, and we essentially rang a cowbell every 10 minutes and ran around ringing the cowbell like, hey, this is your cue, exchange, go talk to somebody else. Yeah. And it was kind of like that unspoken thing that everybody's thinking, but nobody wants to acknowledge.
Say, because it's just a weird thing to bring up.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not all. It's some people are really good at getting out and getting into new conversations, but a lot of people aren't. And so you don't want to be rude, and so the polite thing to do is just continue talking. But that can lead you into only meeting a couple of people and spending a lot of time talking to only 1 or 2. And I knew that was a problem, because we're all here for a purpose, right?
Right.
We're all here to build our networks and to meet new people. That's the intent. And so we basically just acknowledged that, and people really liked it. And so our first one, I think we had like 25 people, but people really enjoyed it. And then the second one was like 45, and then it was like 60, and then we were like, okay, we got to move. And then we started doing it at the Westin in Las Colinas, big hotel, rented a huge conference room. We had 100 plus from every month, after that. And that was how I was able to bring tangible value, because you got 100 people showing up to a event every single month, you're building your reputation. You're building a list of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Even more important.
People find out about that. Like, hey, who's putting these events on? What are they doing?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep. And word travels.
Yeah.
Interested. Yeah.
And so that's how, really the intent, again, was to elevate Dustin more than anything. But as a byproduct of that, my reputation started to increase as well. And so people started to get to know me a little bit more. And, that's how I was able to bring tangible value to the table. Now, realizing that value was another story, because that took a long time too. The multifamily space is very competitive, and it took a long time to actually get a deal. But, so that's a whole nother story. But
man, and I think everyone loves that, like, grinding came from, nothing.
Just that entrepreneur.
Yeah, just that entrepreneur mindset.
Yeah,
so I thought that also elevated you when you were at these, at these events telling your story, and people, I feel like, gravitate towards that.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a little taste of my potential, and if you can awaken that in other people and show them they're capable of that too, people, it inspires them. It gets them excited. And, that's one thing. Again, the cool thing about multifamily, it's very difficult because it has a high barrier to entry. But since everybody that's scaled that and overcame it, knows what it's like, they're willing to do that for others too. Like, I know how difficult it took me 2 years or more to get my first deal in multifamily. So it's like, I want to help other people too, because I know even if you have everything together, just landing a deal is difficult in itself. So it's a cool business to be able to kind of lend that hand down and help the next person as well.
Right.
And you don't have to go into super like specifics of it, but how was, acquiring your first deal? What was that process like with, reaching out to brokers and finally getting that first deal?
Yeah, it was interesting. So, being based here in Dallas, initially the bulk of what we were looking at was here in Dallas, and it's very competitive. We started in 2019. In 2019, prices were already high, and there was a lot of competition, a lot of people moving to Texas. So it was pretty challenging. We were oftentimes very far apart from where they wanted, the purchase price they wanted. And then on top of that, when we were close, there was just a lot of people bidding on them too. So, that was very, very tough. We didn't get our first offer actually accepted until March of 2020. And so basically, because Dustin and I started working together in early 2019. So it took a year to get there, to get that first offer accepted. In March of 2020 is when they started shutting down the whole world because of COVID.
Yeah.
So literally, I remember talking to Dustin. We're like, hey, have you heard of this thing? Like COVID-19, like, what is this thing? Is this just like the flu? Is this going to be gone in 2 weeks? And we're like, okay, let's keep going. Like, we're excited. We got a deal.
Yeah.
And then, we had our offer accepted on that Monday, and it was kind of like excitement and fear because we didn't know what was going on.
Right.
But it's like, hey, we got a deal. So we were excited about that.
Yeah.
And, by that Friday, we had to actually rescind our offer and say, no, we can't move forward because in that span of time, they were literally shutting everything down, saying, hey, we got to quarantine and all this stuff. And so, imagine you spend a year's worth of effort, and then something that nobody's ever seen before happens and the whole world shuts down. Like, just a wild roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah, I was about to say, man, that would suck. Like, your first deal, you're like on cloud 9 and it just comes crashing
feel
down.
like a huge setback.
Yep. And, that was tough for me because, all through that initial year, it was tough staying motivated, staying driven because you see, especially when you get connected in the space, you see everybody that's doing deals and it's like, man, am I doing something wrong here? Like, do we need to improve our process? What do we need to fix? And especially, or are we even doing something wrong,
Yeah, sorry. And especially in your position, like you're looking to get that first deal and that's all you've been working towards. Right. I mean, Dustin's already done a few deals, so he already knows the feeling.
He's got the experience already,
Like, you want to get that feeling, like getting my first deal. And
what did you do to stay motivated? You know how you said, it's hard to keep that motivation. What did you do to stay up, to keep your head up?
Very good question. I had to continuously reinforce within myself why I'm doing this.
Right.
And do I believe in who I'm doing this with?
Right.
Those were the two things that I just had to keep reflecting on. So like I said, in college, it kind of sparked an interest in personal development and going down that path. And so I had already been doing a lot of that stuff. And, when you run into those challenges or you see everybody going, making progress around you and you're not, you got to do a lot of internal work too. Right. Say, hey, why am I doing this in the first place? Because that why is what's going to keep you going. And, I knew, I believed in who I was doing it with. I believed in Dustin, believed in his experience and his character. That was the most important thing to me is, aligning myself with somebody that, I kind of saw eye to eye with and, had similar values and so forth. And I saw a lot of, same things that I value in him. And so as a result of that, I was like, what, I'm not willing to give up on that because I believe in the partnership we're creating here.
Right.
And just continuously, going over that over and over and over again is what kept me going. Because, I'd be lying to say if it wasn't challenging. There was a lot of times where I was like, should I give up? Should I give up on this dream and go do something else? But we were so close so many times. I was like, I can't give up now. Like we put all this effort in and we're almost there. Like I'm not going to give up on it. So that's what ultimately kept me going.
Right. It's just the why is what just kept driving you.
Dude, that's so inspirational.
Yeah.
Like, that gives me goosebumps like thinking about that. And
that's dope. This
is why we wanted to do this. Just listen to people's stories. I mean,
understand,
and kind of like what you said, there's a lot of people in our age or that are lost. They don't know what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And a big thing that comes to my mind that you say is just value. Like find a way to add value, an issue, fix the issue, add value. And that's what we want to do through this podcast is those people that are lost, maybe find some inspiration from your story and learn alongside us and get inspired with us.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is huge, so many people nowadays too, the rise of social media has caused a lot of comparison. A lot of people feel like they're not worthy or valuable or lose their self-confidence, their self-worth because they compare themselves to everybody out there. And this is an individual journey. This is not me against him, me against her. Right. This is what do I want out of my life and what's going to bring me fulfillment because, that's ultimately what matters. It's not a race. There's going to be some people out there that go a lot further, but, are they even happy?
Right.
We got to stop and ask those questions too.
Right.
Because that's what ultimately is most important. There could be people out there on social media that have everything, but they're having mental breakdown, and they don't love themselves. They don't love what they're doing or why they're doing it. And that's what's going to make the biggest difference. And so that's why I think, what you guys are doing is so valuable too, because, my generation, I'm just a little bit ahead of you guys. I'm 27. And so, didn't grow up with quite as much of the influence of the world really, because we weren't that connected. I remember as a kid, I had a brick cell phone, you could call and I don't even think you could text.
A little Nokia.
Yeah. Those indestructible phones.
Yep. And so, a lot of my childhood, I wasn't as connected to the world as people are now. And, I think that's a good thing for myself personally, because, it's got to be challenging growing up and just having so many opinions and so many influencers affecting your decisions and your opinions on a daily basis. That's tough. And so being able to find good influences and find some sort of clarity, I think is, increasingly more important.
Right. No, 100%. And that's crazy. Is we were just having that conversation the other day, like, because I know you were kind of going through a little stint where you're like, man, I see these people doing this and this, and I'm just like, man, you just got to focus on yourself. Yeah. And someone can be doing something and you never really know if they're truly happy or what their life is like. Yeah. So,
I mean, it's a solo journey, just like you said. You just got to find, once you find happiness in yourself, I think everything just falls into place.
Yep. That's what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah. So tell us about your first deal that you finally like, all right, this is my deal.
Yeah. So, again, going back to that, initial offer. So it was kind of interesting because that deal that we got accepted on, it was a 1960s deal in the mid-cities of Dallas. Just, For anybody that knows real estate, it was, had half a chiller, half individual HVACs. It was half flat roof, half pitch. It's kind of a odd deal. We were excited about it because it was in a great location and everything, but, not the ideal property. But since, COVID, shied us away from that one, we kept underwriting. We kept trying to understand, like, hey, where is the value going to be, and how can we minimize risk? Because we didn't know how, there was no light at the end of the tunnel there. And so we didn't know how long it was going to last for, this pandemic, and, everybody not being able to work and so forth. And so we had to ask questions like, how do we minimize risk? And a couple of those was, immediately on the property side. If you obviously buy a newer property, you minimize your risk of something going wrong, right?
Right.
So that stood out to us pretty quickly. It's like, okay, if we buy a newer deal, at least we can minimize the risk of some big unexpected expense coming along down the line.
Right.
And then on top of that, on the tenant side of things, we're like, okay, if everybody's working from home, or, restaurants and bars can't open, what sort of tenant base is going to be able to work from home? If you're kind of a blue collar working class person, you have to go into your job every single day. In our minds, you were a little bit higher of a risk because, we didn't know when stuff was going to open up and you'd be able to go back to work.
Yeah, if they were going to be able to pay their rent or not.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep. And so at the time too, there wasn't a whole lot of government support coming out. It did eventually, but initially there wasn't a whole lot of that. Nobody really knew what to do. And so as a byproduct of that, just to protect ourselves and our investors, we shifted to looking at newer properties. And again, to buy a better property and buy a better tenant base.
Right.
That was our focus. And then on top of that, we were expecting some sort of discount for the older stuff. We're like, hey, there's a lot of risk. The whole world's shutting down. Like, people are losing their jobs.
Yeah.
Shouldn't the price come down?
Yeah.
And just to account for the risk out there. And we really didn't see a whole lot of discounting on the older stuff. We did initially on some really rough stuff that was kind of already rough to begin with,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
not doing well, and COVID kind of opened that wound a little more. And but again, we were like, is it worth the risk when there's no light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah.
In our minds, we're like, no, it's not worth taking on.
Yeah.
And so we just kept underwriting, and again, we kind of shifted that focus, and we were like, all things considered, if they're not discounting older prices, and your rate of return or the cap rate that you're getting these properties at is essentially the same, whether you're buying a 60s deal or a 2000s deal, we're like,
Go with the better deal.
2000s all day long. You know, you get a better property, better tenant base, and you're getting the same return. Like, in our minds, this is a no-brainer. And so, we started looking at newer and newer properties and started sending out offers on them. And, for a long time too, we thought value add was just 60s, 70s, 80s older deals,
Right.
because they're older. They need some value added to them. But the more we started to look into newer deals too, we started to realize that, well, these kind of early mid-2000s deals really haven't been touched in 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
And they're starting to need, some new paint, some new fixtures.
Touch-ups, yeah.
Exactly. And you can raise rents from doing that.
Yeah.
And so we're like, there's a pretty significant value add still here too. And a lot of people in our space weren't really looking at newer deals at that time. So we're like, hey, there's an opportunity here. And so I ended up getting an offer accepted on a deal called Sink at Liberty Hills. We rebranded it as the Henry at Liberty Hills. And it's a property that was built in 2012. And it was 228 units in Northeast Houston.
Wow.
And we got that deal we got a really good deal on that deal because it was kind of Q4 of 2020. There's still some kind of concerns with the elections, the holidays, and all sorts of stuff to deal with. But we just got a BOV, which is broker opinion of value, and it's the value's essentially gone up about $1 million a month since we bought it, which is crazy.
This is your first deal too.
Yeah,
Wow.
first deal.
That's crazy.
I think, the first one is always kind of the benchmark. You got to do well on your first one. And, I think all that, time and effort and hard work and kind of that foundation that we, my partner and I have spent an enormous amount of time building, I think it really paid off.
Yeah.
and just grateful to have the deal and for the partnership. And honestly, looking back, it's again, you go through these struggles, and when you're in them, you're like, man, this is terrible. This is awful. Like, I'm so sick of this, right? But when you're looking back, you're like, man, I wouldn't change it, because
made you who you are.
Exactly. Yeah. Those struggles pushed me to keep going, pushed us as a team to keep, sending out offers, to keep doing the work. And that's what made the difference. So, I know, especially, during the pandemic, a lot of people struggled, not being able to, their lifestyle you had to make change. Your lifestyle was abruptly changed. And so a lot of people took that really hard. And, I think I would just encourage people, like, whatever life throws at you, you got to adapt, you got to pivot, you got to make the most of it.
100%.
Because life's not going to always go the way you expect it. And it's how you react to it that defines what your tomorrows are going to bring.
Yes. It's how you react to change. Yeah. It's, what's that book? Who Moved My Cheese? Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Hayden gave that book to my brother. My brother gave it to me. Then I gave it to Jason. I actually let Jason borrow it and read it.
Yeah, so I get my own copy. Yeah, no, that's the one thing I took away from that is you got to be able to adapt to change, and that's the way you're gonna be.
100%. Yeah. Simple message in that book. Great book. It's short read. You can read it in like an hour.
Yeah.
But yeah, powerful message.
Yeah.
So it took you. So you and Dustin got together 2019, and 2020 you guys closed on the Henry.
2021,
beginning of 2021. So 2 years. And then now you guys are under contract for a second deal. And how long did that take?
Yeah. So the first one took 2 years. The second one took about 9 months. So
nice.
Still took a while, but that deal's almost twice the size too. It's 360 units, and we're buying it for about $55 million. So it's a big one.
Yeah, that's dope.
But yeah, and our ability to raise capital. I mean, we raised capital in about 24 hours. It's just crazy.
How much did you guys have to raise?
14 and a half.
So 14.5 million under 24 hours.
Yeah, it was wild.
That's awesome.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, but again, everything goes back to laying that foundation. We couldn't have done that if we didn't pay attention to all the little details.
Right.
I say all the time, little details make the biggest difference. And it's easy to overlook those, or it's easy to get a deal and then move on to the next one and kind of forget about the experience or your investors in that one. And,
of course,
that's something that we were adamant about not letting happen, because if you take care of your investors, it's the same thing, taking care of a customer, right? Is it harder to get a brand new customer or an existing customer? And, we wanted our customer base to grow, but we wanted also a high retention rate of our customer base as well. So our customers are investors, and it's easier for them to just reinvest with us than having to go out and
explain the whole process again.
Exactly. Build that relationship, have them trust us. Like, that takes a lot of time. So if you take care of what you have and give them a really good experience, it just makes it easier.
Yeah. And I can personally, say from experience now that Hayden and his team and, what they're doing and the way that they, present things to their investors and just their relationship with their investors, I can already tell is next to none. I was fortunate enough to be able to invest in this deal that they're purchasing, and just the way that, all the investors come out and see the property and the way that they show their investors the property. Right. And speaking with other people that have invested with different companies and different people, I already know it's like
it's a different type of.
It's a different type of, like, I'm gonna sleep really good at night knowing my money is invested with Hayden and his team. And for the record, I'm not investing in the property. I'm investing in Hayden and his team, and knowing that they know what they're doing. They're amazing at what they're doing, and I highly, highly recommend anybody and everybody invest with Momentum.
That's huge. I just want to point out too for you, because to have that sort of clarity and to be able to see that at such a young age too. Most people don't ever learn those sorts of lessons, and that's really powerful to learn at such a young age. Like, that's going to pay dividends down the road, and you're going to be so much further ahead of people, because most people don't start to think like that until they're way down the road,
deep into responsibilities. Yeah.
So, exactly what you said, it's impossible for an investor to know everything about a deal that we know, right? We spend hundreds and hundreds of hours. We're talking to all sorts of different people on a daily basis. And so it really is who you're investing with. That's the most important part. Do you trust who it is? Does your gut get a good feeling about this? And, that's the most important thing when it comes to, multifamily investing for sure.
Dude, heck yeah. And so anyone that wants to learn more, where can they reach you at, or like where can they see more of your stuff?
Yeah, just MomentumMultifamily.com is our website. Like I said, happy to answer questions too, because, obviously I wouldn't be where I am if somebody didn't take a chance on me.
Of course.
And take the time to just,
help you understand.
Help me understand, answer my questions. So, happy to do the same. My email is just Hayden, Hayden, at MomentumMultifamily.com. We've got, if you just search Momentum Multifamily on all the socials, you can probably find us there too.
And we'll link all the socials in the comments.
In the biography and everything. Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. So Hayden, as our first honorary guest, you have the honor of doing our very first signing of this crisp $1 bill. So Jason, I know you know why we're doing this.
So we're basically just showing people that knowledge is wealth. The amount of knowledge we're gonna gain and the experiences we're gonna get and learn with you guys is invaluable. You cannot put a dollar amount on it.
There you go. Yeah, grateful for the experience and really appreciate you guys having me on.
Hayden has his first dollar, so no, thank you, man. We really appreciate it. I think this is an incredible first podcast.
No, of course,
we're super excited to get it out so people can listen to it.
I think it's gonna bring a lot of value to a lot of people.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again for having me on, guys.
All right.
Of course.
Sweet.